Introducing everybody knows Mark Kligman, but I'll introduce you anyway. Professor Mark Kligman from UCLA and the Herb Alpert School of Music and the Lowell Milken Center of Music of American Jewish Experience. A great friend, and you know that you are already an honorary member of the Verband Jüdischer Kantoren. The honor is all ours. I asked you, and Mark, by the way, maybe you don't know, but he has been instrumental in planning and making real everything about the convention, including taking care of everything involved with bringing Joyce and Gideon. So yes. One more chance to say thank you. And when we thought of Mark's many topics that he could talk about, we thought that in the context of our convention, we would like to know more about things that are relevant to German Chazanut. And so I think the idea is kind of what would have possibly become of the question that historians are not allowed to ask, what if? But what if all these composers who fled Germany and really made the American Chazanut a style on its own right? Who were these people? And we can ask ourselves maybe, what would have been if they had stayed here? Mark, the stage is yours.
I want to take the opportunity to thank Asaf and Amnon for everything that they've done, which is really tremendous. So big thank you to you guys for everything you've done in the college sport. So we're going to go off into this journey by looking at four individuals: Shalit, Hugo Chaim Adler, Herbert Fromm, and Max Janowski. I don't know how many we'll get through in just 30 or 40 minutes, but we'll do the best we can. So I want to contextualize this within the American Jewish experience. I'm sure many of you already know a lot of this knowledge, but just so that we're on the same page. When we look at American migration, or the migration of Jews to America, the first sort of era, 1658, 1820, are Sephardic Jews who come. And the next wave is the sort of big wave of German Jews that come 1820 to 1880. And there are about 10 times the number of German Jews that there are Sephardic Jews. So there's a real impact that this German community makes. And of course, the basis of so much of American Judaism in the 19th century is based on German Jewry. But then the numbers are by 1880 about 200,000 Jews in the United States. By the time we end at 1930 with Eastern European Jews, that number sort of jumps to 2 million. Mm-hmm. So that's even tenfold more than it was previously. So America is a very interesting sort of sociological model where the organizations that are established are German, are Central European, but the Jews who come into them are Eastern European.
Oh yeah.
So it's a very interesting sort of dialogue. And the way that this works, and sorry that my coloring didn't work within that, but what Isaac Mayer Weiss was trying to do in 1857 with his Minhag America prayer book was to say that we have the Central European Jews coming in, we have the Eastern European Jews coming in. He wants to create Minhag America. So it's interesting that he says that in 1857 and feels that the Minhag America prayer book is going to be it. Of course, it isn't, because each community wants to have its own prayer book, wants to do its own thing. So that never, that's much better, thank you. That doesn't happen, but this sort of becomes, pardon the pun, but the holy grail, so to speak, of the way that things are sort of working in America is how do you define this American Judaism with the synthesis of these two. So of course the synthesis is starting in 1857, but is really ongoing. And I want to argue that it's ongoing until today. I mean, this is not just a one-shot deal. This is something that is constantly in the state of negotiation. So the way that A.Z. Ilson defines the distinction between the, whatever we want to call it, Western versus Eastern European, Central European and Eastern European, is just simply the Western European cantors are usually singing in very regular defined rhythm. There's limited embellishments, we call that syllabic in music. Significant number of secular influences, and sort of, this may overstate it, but a limited use of traditional cantorial styles. I mean, we can't say that Zoltan and Lewandowski did not use new song. They do use new song, yes, but it's really contained, it's limited. The Eastern European tradition, which gets notated later, which comes in into sort of like the kind of like consciousness of looking at East versus West later in the 19th century, is really more free rhythmically, and ornamentation makes up a lot of it, and you can see, and there's a very heavy reliance on new songs. So it's not to say that they're polar opposites, but they're real clear distinctions on a continuum. And it's not as if that the sum total one composition of Zoltan Lewandowski defines them. I mean, Lewandowski did a lot. His Kishimka, which I'm sure most of you know, is entirely Eastern European, influence. So we don't want to put, people just in one particular box, but this really gives us a framework in which to look at. So Idelson defines this, and then there's an American scholar named Samuel Vigoda, a cantor, who wrote a book called Legendary Voices. And in his book, what he does is he calls the Western European cantorate Hasanut HaSeder, right, the Hasanut of order, and the Eastern European tradition, the Hasanut HaRegesh, the Hasanut of emotion, the Hasanut of feeling, right? So again, these are just broad categories that we'll work with. So just another few words about an introduction. This is sort of a whole panoply of composers. In today's jargon, teaching at a liberal West Coast university, these are all dead white men, right? So I want to just acknowledge the fact that women are very important and significant, and they come in a very important way. They're just not represented here at this particular moment. But these are all composers who are working at the same time, working together. Some big generalities is that Binder, who's American-born, becomes a very, very important conduit to get a lot of these composers to be working in the synagogue. And what's interesting is that most of these cantors, or the truth of the matter is only a few cantors in this group, most of these music directors, composers, did not intend early in their life to be synagogue composers. It's things that happened that situated that. So to a large extent, Binder, Fried, and Fromm, I guess we can say, and Pickett to a large extent, are kind of part of this New York chevra that become the basis of a lot of American Hasanut in the first half of the 20th century. Max Janowski, who has a huge influence, is sort of always the person who's sort of the anti-conformist. He doesn't really work in New York. He's doing his own thing in Chicago. And so there's some really interesting dynamics, but we can sort of look at that later. But we're just going to look at the top row of the German-born cantors. So Heinrich Schalit has a very, very interesting sort of chronology of places that he's been. He starts off by being a cantor in Munich, very shortly in Rome, comes to England, and then finally comes to the United States. And it's funny because I had always thought of him as like he was in Denver, Colorado. I always thought he was there for a long time, but you can see he was there for a relatively short period of time. What's interestingly said about Heinrich Schalit is that after 1926, he devotes all of his musical efforts to solely Jewish music. And it's a very interesting story of someone who had a lot of promise to be a composer, to really write more broadly, but the way in which he experienced things in his life was that he wanted to dedicate himself to Jewish music solely by 1926. What's very unfortunate about this group of composers and most group of American composers is we don't really have comprehensive biographies. We don't have comprehensive work lists. Those are the kind of projects that I'm trying to get started and to get going, because in order for this music to be really a part of, discussions more institutionalized, we need to have these things. And that's really the incredible gift that I have with an endowed chair at UCLA and also an endowed center, is the goal is how do we embed Jewish music into these academic environments. So these are the projects that I'm getting involved in. So just to tell you a little more about Shalit in this regard, is that he had a lot of promise. He really won some different awards. And the transition in 1926, Elliot Kahn, some of you may or may not know that name. He was a librarian at Jewish Theological Seminary, wrote his doctorate on Heinrich Shalit. And I knew that Shalit had transitioned to just doing Jewish music. I thought it was a little bit later when he finally came to America. But Elliot Kahn says, we don't really know what the why is as to why 1926 was that time period. So he studied with Cantor Joseph Singer, who's a well-known 19th century cantor in Vienna, that trained many, many other cantors. And also, Shalit was very, very much influenced by his brother Leon, who was a real ardent Zionist in this earlier time period. So this aspect of really transitioning to Jewish content is based upon a lot of the people that he met. And of course, Emanuel Kirchner had a huge influence on him. I'm sorry, Ralph Selig isn't here. He's a huge Emanuel Kirchner fan. So he probably had more things that he could really say about it. And Shalit really influenced a lot of people. And one particular person that he impacted was Paul Ben Chaim, who was from Munich. So Shalit had a really big impact on him. So just some things that he said. I mean, I'm not going to read all these because you could read them, but I think the first one I think is the most significant. Zolzer and Lewandowski's choir compositions are largely feeble imitations of the classic and romantic types of that time. Only too often the German folk melody or the Protestant choir song serves as a model. The music content is meager, and only seldom does the music express what is conveyed in the exalted and powerful words of the text. So, in some ways, Shalit is really criticizing them for being, too stale and not emotional. Melodies and harmony are mostly procured at second or third hand, and even for their day are conventional and superannuated. So, I mean, the real, I don't know that it's a condemnation, but it's a real critique of Zolzer and Lewandowski. What's interesting is that there are similar comments by Binder at this same time, trying to say, how do we sort of move on to the model that we have inherited from Zolzer and Lewandowski? Binder's model was to put more of the Eastern European tradition into the American consciousness, which he does in numerous ways. Something we could talk about at another time, but Shalit's not alone in this. It's part of his efforts, and a lot of it is how they're going to incorporate the modality of music that are part of the Eastern European tradition, a more pronounced Eastern European tradition, and how that then impacts harmony. I mean, I really don't have the time to go into a lot of detail on this because I'm trying to cover 4 composers. So some musical features of Shalit, we'll listen to a couple of things first off. He was really, he's really into modal harmony, right? So there's sort of this contradiction between what the common practice period music would be when you want to have a dominant 5 chord, right? A leading, needing a raised 7th leading tone, when in most modal music, the leading tone is not raised, the leading tone is lowered, meaning you'll have a minor dominant chord rather than a major dominant chord.
There's a wonderful short book by Isadora Fried about harmonizing Nusach or harmonizing.
Harmonizing Jewish prayer.
Right.
Yeah. That's sort of like the textbook.
The standard book.
Yeah, textbook on this. So and what's really great about what Fried did is really trying to document what was going on, and it's not like any of these people are learning it in school. They're all inventing it on their own, which is really very, very interesting. All right, so he has limited use, but sometimes very harsh dissonance. So when the dissonance comes in, it really is very purposeful for him. And he's also drawing upon melodies of Idelson. And this was an effort at the time that, in a way to authenticate the melodies that you're using, you go to some source. And it's in the 1930s, well, late 20s, early 30s, that A.Z. Idelson's Thesaurus of Hebrew and Oriental Melodies is coming out that people are using. So I want to play a few things. The unfortunate thing is that the pieces I wanted to play, didn't have good recordings of. So I'm just going with the recordings I have. They're good recordings, but it's not showing everything I want to show. But this is really very interesting because Shalit set a lot of different Hebrew poetry to music. This particular poem is by
Yehuda Halevi. Singing. I know her. I've worked with her.
Yeah?
Yeah.
All right, so these are recordings from the Milken Archive. And I know every time I play things for cantors, I always have to say who's singing, because everyone's going to ask me that
She's
question.
a mezzo. She's not a soprano.
So that should be, okay, thank you, I'll change that. So I just want you to, I don't know if any of you know this, Shnat Olam, it's a really, really, really beautiful setting. This really, really conveys, Shalit's compositional craft. So it kind of reminds me of Debussy in a way that he's writing pianistically, of having this, dissonance right on the downbeat, and it's just very, very slight sort of release. But you could hear just this real sense of simplicity and control in his music, which is really very common. So next thing I'm going to play is a Matovu, and I actually found an interesting video recording of it. So you can read about it right here. craft of the composer, you know, in terms of how he's bringing back the theme, and the harmonizations are just really put it in the right place. Very often what they're doing is they're not giving you a third of a chord, and you just hear like these very open octaves and open fifths. So when you do hear the harmony, it then really comes in really quite effectively. Just because I want to play some of these other composers, and you're just gonna not play these. Let's go on to Hugo Chaim Adler. And I look at this picture and I see a strong resemblance to Amnon. I don't know if you guys see.
The ears.
So every time I kept doing this, I'm like, is that Amnon? Okay. So Hugo Chaim Adler, born in Belgium, and he was from a big family, but he was raised here in Mannheim, and then eventually he studies here, and then he becomes, of course, the cantor here at the synagogue in Mannheim. I'm sure most of you know the story. The story is really told through
Sam Adler told us last year he was telling the story here.
Yeah, and it's a really very fascinating story. I think Hugo Chaim Adler has this really interesting character to him. You'll hear how I have a little video of Sam Adler talking about his father, which I think is really very, very interesting. But what's important about Hugo Chaim Adler is not only being a cantor and composer, but also really working as an educator. So for him, it wasn't solely just singing from the pulpit, but really being a part of it. And a lot of it came through his very strong education. So he came to the United States in 1939. Of course, his son, Sam Adler, is a very famous American composer and academician, and really the main textbooks in orchestration in the American Academy were written by Sam Adler, and they're still being used, and he has had hundreds of students throughout the years. So just to tell you a little bit about his musical writing, I think his choral writing is really quite fantastic. I mean, he really knows how to write for choirs. And just making the whole sort of independent contrapuntal lines work through harmony as well is really significant. And also I think that, maybe it's part of this German sort of structure of just having this real clarity in the design of each piece. So it really comes across very well. He also has this wonderful playful quality to him, which I'll describe. The best thing for you is to hear Sam Adler talk about his father. So we're going to do that. About a 2-minute video.
My father came to Mannheim in 21 as second cantor. There were 5 cantors, and he was second cantor. However, he was a terrific pianist and excellent organist. So he fooled around with the music, and they didn't like it. And he was very smart because he married my mother. That was the smartest thing he did, because my grandfather was quite a wealthy businessman and was on the board, and you don't throw out your son-in-law. And so that's the only reason he was not let go, because they all said, look, this music is from Messina, and you can't change it. I mean, this is the greatest composers, and they weren't. But he changed the harmony, he changed the counterpoint, all kinds of things. And he stopped for a little while, and then he wrote a version of the Hallel poem to Zion, on Zion. And that was his first big work. And when it was performed, all of a sudden they said, gee, we have somebody here who's quite a musician. So by 1930, and this was even before the Hitler era, he had established himself. And when Wolf Levy went in 1930, went to Liverpool, he became Oberkantor. But as I always tell this story, he really hated this music, and he wrote a lot. He wrote this big liturgical work called Shira Hadasha, which contained a lot of the liturgical things, new settings, which slowly but surely made their way into the repertoire of the Mannheim synagogue.
And of course, his father really wasn't the Mannheim synagogue for very long before he had to leave, and of course, shortly after Kristallnacht, the family moves to America. So I want to play, I think I'll play at least two of these. First, we'll hear the Kilmali Racham. Unfortunately, I don't have anything recorded from his service, which we had. And this is Cantor Very Fine. Even what you can hear of that just little bit that I played is not like the stereotypical German sound that I was talking about earlier. You hear the
Something
emotionality
in between,
yeah.
within it.
Yeah.
You hear how, it's not fully the Eastern European Musach, but it's drawing upon that Musach, and he's being really very, very inventive with what the sort of counterpoint is to it, through the accompaniment. I want you to hear early, I see this.
Shachar al-Peshcha.
Yeah, thank you, Shabbat Peshcha. And I just want you to hear just how beautiful his choral writing is. But you can already start to tell the American influences that are coming into it as the end of each lines come to this very beautiful consonance at the very end, where you just feel that coming together. Very much a part of sort of the American a cappella scene.
May I say something about this
Please.
particular piece? It is originally published in his 1935 book Shira Chadasha, which he wrote here in Mannheim, and Johannes and myself have been performing this. This is the Hadran, the Zugabe, the encore in every one of our Hanukkah concerts.
Oh, wow.
Only this a cappella in Hebrew. I can send you all the notes if you want.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, it's really very interesting because Sam Adler actually did this recording for the Milton Archive, and he was really insistent on doing this in English. So I think that's part of the American adaptation was for putting it in English. Okay, his Chad Gadya is a really wonderful rendition of Chad Gadya. I want you to hear it so you can just sort of see where, I think you'll see the playful side, and you'll hear how he's pulling with strands of tradition in it. think the playfulness really just comes through really quite clearly. All these recordings from the Milken Archive are available through all the streaming services, through Apple, Spotify, YouTube, so you can find that.
Last week, Samuel Adler called me in another issue, and I told him that the conference is now, and he sent his greetings to all of you. Warm greetings to all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
He's
so
now
much.
nearly 98 years, so,
Wow.
but he's at the phone. He's fresh and clear and intellectual on
composing.
on the high.
Absolutely, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. All right, so Herbert Fromm has also a very interesting story. You can see he's born in Bavaria, but studies at the State Academy in Munich. He then serves as an assistant conductor at two opera houses in Germany. And then by 1933, he really is no longer able to do those jobs because of the Nazi prohibitions. And so he starts working for the Jüdische Kulturbund in Frankfurt from 1933 to 1936. And he's really using all of his gifts as an accompanist, as a cantor, really as a composer. And then he was the organist for the Frankfurt West End Synagogue. I actually did a concert at the West End Synagogue with Nanti Baram a couple years ago. That's a stunning synagogue. I mean,
Yeah.
it was just-
Yeah, that
just a
organ is
gorgeous-
still there, but it's gathering
Yeah,
dust
yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's not used in the Orthodox.
Yeah, we didn't use it
It's
either.
destroyed.
So he emigrates to the United States around the same time as the others in 1937, and Hugo Chaim Adler becomes a very, very important influence to him, and really encourages him to take his gifts and use it in the synagogue. So a huge influence for him is Hugo Chaim Adler. He also studies with Paul Hindemann. I'm sorry for the misspelling there, not Paul Hindemann, but Paul Hindemann. He settles in the Boston area from 41 to 72, and that's where Hugo Chaim Adler was outside of Boston. Okay, so a lot of his larger works, his cantatas, are all based on Jewish themes, and he has a number of compositions that, of course, are not based on Jewish music. What I think is interesting is just to hear him in his own words, and I'm just paraphrasing from different things he was able to pull from. And he always talks about the high standards for synagogue music. And one thing that he says is that, I mean, it's the way I'm quoting this here, he grew angry feeling that adulterated synagogue music, which he found that was, happening, of course, through his lifetime, that he felt that it hindered worshipers from being able to face the highest in life. So there's a lot to be said about these kind of comments when these really highly gifted classical composers are dedicating themselves to synagogue music in terms of sort of looking at different things that are happening in America as being, for the masses, and it being pop, and it really diluting things. I think the way in which he's arguing it is that if people understood what the tradition was and how much it could really help them be connected to something holy, so it's, in a way, he's really describing more what's lost in the process than bemoaning the fact that things are just, developing in a direction. So I think it's very interesting. Of course, this quote from Pirkei Avot, Dalit Memi Talmudum, know before whom you stand, is also kind of part of this as well. So before I play just a couple of songs of his, there's a really nice little moment in Sam Adler's interview where he talks about Herbert Fromm.
My father was responsible for Fromm going into the Jewish music field. Fromm had been conductor in Würzburg at the opera, and he was already quite famous because he wrote a children's opera that was done throughout Germany and a full-length opera, besides a lot of other music. And then he was thrown out, and he became, he studied organ, and he studied with Kligman and was in Frankfurt. And my father said, you ought to study something about, and so he studied Hebrew.
But in Germany?
In Germany. And he
Why?
came to
But I
this,
mean, what was the connection? How did your father know him?
well, everybody knew my father. I remember when I was 4 years old, Herbert visited my father in Mannheim. I remember Herbert from then. And then, of course, he went to Buffalo first, became a music
Yeah, I know,
director.
but did he, Judaically in Europe, I mean,
He studied very much at the what was that Jewish school called in Frankfurt, that famous Philanthropie, and he studied there.
why?
Because my father said to him, when you go to America, that's going to be your bread and butter.
But this is only when he knew he was going to be going
Yes,
to America.
yes.
Otherwise, in other
Otherwise,
words,
he was a successful opera
right, that's
conductor. What is
right.
he?
So he did that in preparation for a
That's
job
right, that's
in America.
Well, and also was kicked out. In 1934, he was kicked out.
That's right.
So he came to Buffalo.
Yeah.
We became very, very close friends when he moved to Boston. I was 11 by that. It was the first year that we were in Worcester that he went to Boston.
Would you say that the possible exception of your father, that from a musical point of view, I'm talking about from,
He was a great
especially on your synagogue music, was he the biggest influence on your on you as a synagogue composer?
I would say yes.
So I just want to leave a couple of minutes for questions, but I just want to play a couple things from. But the most important thing to say about From is that amongst the three composers we looked at so far, he has probably been the most influential in America. Very prolific, and many of his works have become sort of part of the standard repertoire for American, particularly Reform synagogues. So I just want to play a couple of things. I'll play his Or Zarul Tzadik. This was recorded by camper Robert Abelson, who unfortunately died in the last couple of weeks. So just wanted to acknowledge this very important cantor in America, Robert Abelson. So we can hear developing in From style is like these modern traits that are happening, but it doesn't dominate the work. It's just there as transition. So I think that's why his music is a little more well known. I just want to lastly just play part of his Purim madrigal. He wrote a number of madrigals based on for different holidays, where he takes well-known holiday tunes and then really plays with it from a choral perspective. So let's just skip a look around. These madrigals are really, really wonderful, and they really work well with college choirs, and so we have a lot of fun with it.
I have quite a lot of From in my library, I think.
So I'll have to talk about Max Janowski next time because there's not enough time to do it. But
Okay.
I just want to be on time. Just want to take any couple of questions before? Yeah.
I'm curious to know how much of this is influenced by America and how much of it is imported from Germany. Like, how American is this all-American cantorate, or how German is it?
Yeah, I think that there's Well, the way that I would answer that is that it's sort of like equal doses of both. I think that because they came with this great compositional craft in these different composers, they also really knew how to adapt to the environment that they're in. Remember, the
Right.
time that they're writing that this music is coming out in the 30s and 40s and 50s, their congregants are immigrants or the first generation of children from immigrants. So it's still, they're writing for a community of people who still wanted to hear, you know, this style of music. And I think that the way in which that they're 20th century writers as opposed to the 19th century,
Yeah.
Zolzer and Lewandowski, is because they are writing in a more of a modern idiom.
Yeah.
You know, that it's not just purely, I mean, I think that the first one is Shalit's description of Zolzer and Lewandowski was looking at that with real distance, you know, and a bit of disdain. And I think what they're turning over, you know, within it is to say, hey, we could do the same things that they were trying to do, but put it within our time period. So I think that the freshness of harmonies that they're using are really significant. And also just, you know, they're just doing it in a container, I think that's really, that's kind of more approachable. I think what's very interesting though about each of the ones, at least that I'm playing for you, they're all short. They're all like 1.5 to like 2 minutes. And I think that that's what happened in the 20th century, is the different liturgical segments got shorter and shorter.
Right.
Because, and it's just a matter of how you sort of give the character of each different liturgical rubric within the time period. I think they just had the gift to really just kind of nail the moment in a really direct way. Yeah.
Did you write also for other fests, like not only Purim, like?
Oh yeah. There's a whole series of them. He has one for Hanukkah, for Sukkot, for the Shalosh Regalim. I don't think there's a cantata for the High Holy Days, but there's I think there are about 6 cantatas. There are five or six, and they're all really wonderful.
And
A lot of
it's to be
shit.
found in that Milken archive.
The Milken Archive did record all of them. Yeah.
Yeah, Purim, you can hear a lot of Lortzing, that's so much early romantic opera in that
Yeah.
Purim madrigal.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
Lortzing, he was channeling Lortzing.
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, this is,
But with a dash of Donizetti.
yeah, I mean, there are all these styles are being
Oh, yeah.
incorporated here. All right, so anyways, this is really just an introduction to this topic. There's really so much more to be said. I'm sorry I'm not able to talk about Janowski. I mean, he's another really interesting sort of category, but I want to make sure we.
You'll be here next year, I know.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
I'm,
to be
I will.
continued.
Yeah, to be continued, that's good. One last question, yeah.
Yeah, this is so fascinating.
How would you estimate the, you were mentioning Eagleson in the context of Shalit, like how was the Shalit also from reception of Eagleson's idea to search like for sonic roots, less in the European Western music, but in an imagined Orient, and put it in the back to like.
Yeah, that's a great question. That would be a great separate topic. I mean, to answer it really quickly, I would say certainly Shalit would fall into that category. I don't see that happening with Fromm or Hugo Haim Adler. Binder in some ways was a part of that, part of adopting different things of Idelson, and also Saminsky, if you know of Saminsky's work, he really did a lot of that too. So I think it was more or less something that some people used. There are a lot of really interesting discussions that were going on in the 30s and 40s amongst these German immigrants like Joseph Gasser and a number of others, and they created this this Jewish music forum in the 1930s, and they have a lot of very open discussions about this, this topic in particular. In some ways, that's what sets Janowski apart a little bit, that hopefully I'll talk about this next year, where he's works more in writing modal music that's not clearly identifiably like Av or Rabbah. He's using Dorian mode, he's using other modes. So you don't get this purely European feel to it, but it's not also particularly Eastern European as well. So that kind of like in-betweenness of those two is the space that a lot of the Israeli composers at the same time are working in, like Paul Ben Chaim. And that's very, very heavily influenced by Edelson. All right.
Thank you very much.
Personally, I'm very happy to know that next year we're going to have you talk about Max Janowski, which is one of my personal favorites. Thank you for wonderful, yeah, and we'll continue right away with Alex Jakubowicz talking about his fabulous book. We'll just need a minute to
some lights too in the meantime.
first to connect the technique.
Yes, this is where the nice pictures.
Okay, so you want to play with it and short circuit. Will you be able to turn it off later?
I might.
Okay,
I'm here.
fantastic. The man with the light switch. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
To go back to the beginning.
Yeah, I don't know why it's not. It's not showing. It's not really showing my. Actually, I don't understand what's happening.
Is it because the stick is no longer connected?
No. This is fine. You see, it's not really showing the desktop.
Is it that several files are open simultaneously?
No. It wouldn't.
Okay,
Well, we'll have to.
so they started anyway and hope for the best.
No, we'll give you 5 more minutes. Don't worry. I just. Anybody knows his way with technique better than I am?
Definitely not.
What kind of problem are we working on?
I don't know why the signal is not really coming. It's like half coming to the. It's just half coming to the beamer. It shows my desktop, but this is not what I see on my Bildschirm.
Yeah. Maybe
Maybe you have to like. Because it looks like it's not depending on desktop.
Right.
So I don't know where the settings are.
You know.
or in the area where you can kind of those settings.
Okay, good, thank you. Save the day. So.
It's in the wrong place though. It's halfway through the file.
No, this, don't worry about that. Okay.
Yes.
So this is the first one?
Yes.
Good. Alex Jakubowicz. We would like to continue.